Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. My name is Ace and I've got more Guild Wars 2 content here for you. This time I'm going to show you guys all the skills, all the weapon skills and all the weapon abilities that the Necromancer has. And all their corresponding weapons. And we're starting off with a very traditional combo, because not only do you start off with a one-handed axe when you create a Necromancer, you also have a pretty standard horn allowing you to buff and such. But before we go there, we'll start off with the auto attack. And before I do anything else, actually, if you're looking for specific weapons or are just trying to find specific skills for a specific weapon, there should be time codes below in the description box, because these videos tend to become very long, and this is why I've added these codes to allow you guys to skip directly to the point that you want to be. That said, auto attack of the one-handed axe. And it's a double type, a double slash if you like. And it does cause 2 stacks of vulnerability, which is in total a defense drop of 60, which is quite nice, because you can actually reliably stack it all the way up to 9 before you are unable to stack it and you actually need other people to help you with it. And as you can see, every time you do get a killing blow or kill an entire mob by yourself, you have the chance to gain Jagged Horrors, which is just a passive, so don't pay too much attention to that. But while we wait, we can always move to Ghastly Claws, which is a pretty powerful attack considering, and it's a very nice ability to gain a lot of life force, which allows you to use a certain transformation or a powerful buff. And as you can see, it doesn't initially look like it does too much damage, but when people are grouped up quite a bit, it adds up. It only lasts for 3 seconds, and the range is not too big, so you have to be careful with it. But as you can see, the damage does add up quite nicely. Right, moving on to 3, which is Unholy Feast. And the damage is not really impressive, but it all comes down to what you want to use it for, because this is usually used for the cripple effect, so you can kite people around or run away a little bit easier. As you can see, I killed a mob, I gained a Jagged Horror. Let's just move to number 3. And that was number 3 for you. As you can see, you just explode from yourself. There's a circle that explodes from yourself, and everybody caught in that initial blast radius is crippled and takes a little bit of damage. And also for every target that you hit, I believe, you gain a retaliation, as you can already state. So let's try it again. Right there, retaliation reflects incoming damage. Alright, now the horn itself, moving to Wail of Doom. And it's basically a frontal cone daze attack. Looks a little bit like this. As you can see, the target is dazed. So, not too impressive, unless people are grouped up and you are in front of them or behind them, depending on how you aim your cone. But it's all used for the daze. And the last ability, which is the second ability of the horn, is Locust Swarm. And once again, damage is not incredibly high, but it does give yourself swiftness, and it cripples enemies. So definitely something you want to be using to get out or to get in even. As you can see right there, getting some swiftness. And everybody around me is being crippled, as you can already tell. So it's basically just an aura, and everybody that gets close to you will suffer. So those are the axe and the horn abilities. And now we are going to move to the double dagger. I have to move out of combat because these golems keep respawning. And we're back out of combat finally. These Jagged Horrors do keep you in combat for quite a long time, because these golems don't really fight back. So you want to keep that into consideration as well if you're trying to fight people and you're spawning Jagged Horrors while you're trying to get out of combat. Really annoying, but it doesn't matter, because right now we have the double daggers. As you can see, daggers on both sides. And I will show you guys the abilities that are corresponding with it. Starting off with the auto attack. Pretty straightforward. Quite fast attacking. Does nice damage on the third hit if it's a crit. And it does give you some decent life force as well. Moving on to the second ability, which is Life Siphon. Pretty straightforward. Just drain the enemy's health and add that to your own. Dark Pact. Basically an immobilizing ability. Doesn't do too much damage and you have to be fairly close to it as well. But as you can see, chains are placed and the target can't move from his position. Going to Deathly Swarm. And Deathly Swarm is actually quite nice because it does bounce about. As you can see, right there, bounces 3 times, blinding all the enemies that it does hit, as you can already see. And the last one is Enfeebling Blood, which is a very nice AoE, as you can see. And I will bring it down upon an enemy. You have to understand that AoE damages like AoE spells like this don't do a lot of damage most of the time. But this specific AoE spell does have a very nice debuff, weakness as you can already tell. And of course some very nice bleeding damage which you don't have to misjudge. And these are pretty much the double dagger spells that are available to you if you wear a dagger in your main hand or of course on your offhand. Right now I'm just trying to get out of combat because I've tagged 3 mobs with of course the Deathly Swarm right here. And it does seem to take ages before you actually get out of combat. But we are going to focus on the scepter as well as of course the focus itself. And there you go. So we have a focus and a scepter equipped, which is pretty standard for a caster instead of using actual weapons, clearly. And as you can already tell, Blood Curse. And Blood Curse is not as weird as you, or not as simple as you initially think, because it does cast 3 times, but the 3rd time is a poison instead of a bleeding effect. So it does apply bleeds, but also a poison on the 3rd hit. As you can tell, the dots do add up quite nicely. Grasping Death, as you can already tell, not as much damage, but fairly nice debuffs as well as cripple and bleeding. And there you go, just some skeleton hands coming from the ground, which is something you don't want to encounter in a dark hallway, trust me. Yeah, moving on to Feast of Corruption. And Feast of Corruption is a little bit more powerful than all the other spells you've seen so far. But it also gives you quite a nice amount of life force if you strike your target. Let's just see. There you go. The range is only 600, so if you use weapons like this, the range, you don't expect to be at a very long range. Because only the ranges start to become impressive when they are beyond 1000. But it's fairly simple. You just eat the enemy. Quite literally by the looks of it. So, just quite nice to get some additional life force. Because you have to add conditions to your target. And if you have a lot of debuffs on your target, it does add up quite nicely. Alright, moving to 4, Reaper's Touch. And this is where things become a little bit more interesting. Not only do you get swiftness yourself, but it also applies vulnerability to the enemy. And it does bounce several times. And the reason why I say things are becoming a little bit more interesting is because the weapon, your weapon type basically changes. Well, not the actual weapon type, it's just that the model of the weapon gets added onto. And it makes it starts to look like an additional scythe, which is quite nice. As you can see, you can hold the scythe, and if targets are close enough, they will bounce about as well. And then you get some very nice vulnerability stacks on multiple targets, as well as some good swiftness on yourself. Spinal Shiver is the last ability and the second ability of your focus, and not a lot of damage. But as you can see, it does remove buffs and also chills targets. So possibly a very nice PvP or kiting ability for PvE. As you can see chilled right there. And the damage is not too impressive, but you do have a very large range on it. So this is your debuff ability or your kite ability that you can use with a 25-second cooldown. So you want to be careful and time these things right and not spam them mindlessly. There you go. And this pretty much sums it up for the scepter and the focus. So we are going to move in the staff. And of course staffs are being the are the main weapons you will find to be used for most casters because they have the most powerful spells. But you were to expect spells from a staff and not the abilities that a Necromancer has. The auto attack is pretty straightforward. As you can see, your weapon actually turns into a scythe as long as you're using your auto attack, which is kinda neat. I like scythes to be used, but I like to use them in a melee melee fashion. As you can see, not only you gain life force from it, range is quite nice, 1200, and it's pretty standard auto attack damage. The second one is Mark of Blood, and all 4 attacks that you can see right here are all marks that you have to inscribe into the ground. But they do buff, but also debuff. As you can see, the debuff here is a bleeding effect. So right there, the longer they are standing into it, the more stacks of bleeding they take, to a certain extent of course, and it lasts for 8 seconds. Well, if you apply it to yourself, you should be able to get some regeneration going for allies. So you have to take that into consideration if it's triggered by a foe apparently. Which is a weird mechanic if you think about it, so I'm gonna try one thing out. If it actually was. Yeah, it's getting very crowded in here right now. These are the testing grounds, of course. And there's not a lot of room. Let me put it that way. As you can see right there, if you put it onto an enemy and you stand in the circle itself, when it's triggered, you gain your swiftness, or your regeneration in this case. And here is Chilblains, which is also, as you can see, a mark. Just put on the ground, they take some damage, and the targets get chilled. So very nice to put on choke points, because it does apply poison damage, which also has a healing debuff, but also slows enemies down. So quite nice to use that as a as an ability to keep your distance. Putrid Mark, which is pretty straightforward, just a AoE damage ability. There you go. Doesn't look too impressive, but you have to understand these are AoE abilities with a very big range, as you can tell. So it only starts to really show off its power when it's used in the proper situation. And of course the last ability for the on the ground combat before we go underwater is Reaper's Mark. And as you can see, it doesn't do a whole lot of damage. Actually, it doesn't do any kind of damage really, but it does apply a fear effect. And that's why it's used. It does apply an AoE fear, which can be potentially a lifesaver, or in PvP purposes also be, of course, a lifesaver. Especially if you consider the amount of range that you have on this specific ability, without any traits added or any kind of buffs to it. So while we have finished up all the underground weapons, we are going to move into... Oh, something came out of the ground right there. A jagged horror. We are going to move to the underwater combat. Going to take a quick waypoint here, because walking is for the lazy. And as you can already tell, we'll start off with a PvP spear. I believe that any class can use a spear, so it is pretty straightforward. You basically stab your foe as your auto attack. You do gain some life force, which is to be expected. And it does seem that your third attack is an AoE-like ability. So that's kind of neat. The second one, Wicked Spiral, does apply vulnerability once again. And it does hit multiple times, as you can see right here. So it's a nice AoE that you can use to move about while still attacking enemies. Deadly Feast, not only do you gain swiftness, but you also start to heal yourself. So let's just show how that looks. Doesn't look too visually impressive, but it does apply on targets that are around you. So if you are in a situation where you're surrounded, this can save your life because you can get out a little bit quicker as well as gain health while doing so. Deadly Catch, which is pretty much this. Nice cripple, pulls people to you, which is questionable considering you are a caster, but you can then, if you like, combo that with Wicked Spiral and do some very nice damage. But you have to understand that if you use that ability, you will draw enemies near you. Even though you cripple them, you also pull them near you, so give or take on that one. And Dark Spear, sorry for the pronunciation there, is the ultimate, if you like, of the spear ability, doing an insane amount of bleeding damage, as you can already tell. And you pull yourself to an enemy this time, applying some very decent, initial damage while waiting then for the even better bleeding damage. Fairly long cooldown, 25 seconds. And while we wait for that, we're going to move to the Trident. Doesn't look too impressive to what you were, well, at least to what you would expect from a Trident, but nonetheless still very decent because the Trident is usually the ranged attack for underwater. As you can see, applying some debuffs, pretty straightforward, pretty reliable bleeding damage that you can apply while doing some initial damage as well. Fairly long range, so that's always very nice. Feast, as you can see, it's a AoE around you, applying weakness to the enemy as well as getting some life force and doing some low but still AoE like damage. So if you are low on life force and you are surrounded, definitely the ability that you want to be using. Alright, going to the third ability, which is Foul Current. And as you can already tell, leaving poisonous bubbles behind. And as you can tell, it's basically a charge, and you do leave some poison behind you, which does do some poison damage, as well as the standard poison healing debuff. So it's a fairly nice charge to either get into combat or just to get out of combat, or if you're just kiting people around underwater. Sinking Tomb, it's pretty standard a temporary CC. As you can see right here, the Elementalist has the ability to also float people in a similar fashion, or sink. And it seems that only the Necromancer has the ability to sink people. And of course, Frozen Abyss chills foes near you, doing a lot of damage, as you can already tell. Some very decent initial damage, and also applying the chill effect. There you go. As you can see, they're all chilled. And the damage is not too bad, because you also have to understand that this is still an AoE effect. But you do have to be fairly close to enemies, so I suppose these abilities do go well with all the things like the charge that you have right here. So you can charge in, then combo Frozen Abyss, for example. But it all depends on the situation and of course how much life you actually have left, because you don't want to go into combat, into melee range if you are close to dying, I would assume. Anyway guys, this pretty much sums it up for the Necromancer. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more Guild Wars 2 content. Make sure to leave a comment and like this video if you do. And stay tuned for more content, because I'm trying to put out every single class right here. So I hope you enjoy these videos, and I will catch you guys next time.